Today I want to talk about initiative systems. Professor Dungeon Master recently did a video on this topic. I thought there's a lot of very different initiative systems out there, and they really change how the combat is played and how the combat feels. So I want to give an overview of a number of different initiative systems that I know of and how those systems influence the combat and the game. Let's start with the most basic, which is no initiative system. Dungeon World, for example, has no initiative system, no action system, no movement range, no nothing. And that really confused me when I first read the rules as someone coming from 3rd edition D&D. But I eventually got used to it. Just describe the situation to your players and then ask them what they want to do. Dungeon World is a very player-driven game. The player's actions determine so much of what happens in the game world. And once I got used to that idea, it was fun, no problem at all. Though I found that GMing Dungeon World was mentally exhausting because you had to come up with so much stuff on the fly. So it was fun, but also a bit of hard work, mental workout. Now, to a simple system, I think Merkborg uses this. At the beginning of combat, have one of the players roll, 1 to 3, monsters go first, 4 to 6, players go first. So, very simple system, and what this does is that it is very fast, and once you've done that, you can forget about that and focus on the other aspects of combat. And then you can determine the order in which the PCs act in a number of different ways. Just go clockwise around the table or from top to bottom in your Discord chat, or do kind of popcorn initiative like Death in Space, where once a player is done with this combat round, it's his say who's next to take his turn. And that way the players can do a bit of tactic with the order of combat. Then you could have something like what Professor Dungeon Master uses. The GM rolls a d6 and one of the players roll a d6, and who rolls higher goes first, so it's a bit of a competition. If your players like to roll dice, if your players like to roll dice competitively, that is certainly an advantage of that. And he also does that every combat round, which is totally possible because it's just one roll, it's very fast. And what that does is, after you lost initiative in one round, if you win initiative the next round, you get to act back to back. So take 2 turns between the 2 enemy turns. And that can change the dynamic of a combat situation a lot. So it's a bit more random, a bit more chaotic. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I personally think that combat situations should be frantic and chaotic, and the players shouldn't feel safe. They shouldn't feel confident in the outcome of the combat. From there, we go to a system you are probably familiar with from 5e. Everyone rolls their individual initiative, and then you just go in the order of initiative. And That system is fine, really. I think for what it does, it's a bit complicated, but you can build on that system to make initiative more important if you want to. For instance, you could give a number of spells and abilities that influence the initiative, so that you can make a character build that you can plan to have a better chance at winning the initiative. Or even roll a smaller die than a d20, or even get rid of the roll altogether, so initiative is only determined by skill and maybe by situational modifiers. So it becomes more of a tactical advantage you can gain. Now, if you want to make this initiative, this tactical advantage even bigger, if you have low hit points or a really punishing wound system, it becomes very important to act first in combat. Maybe you wound your opponent, gain a significant advantage, or you kill him outright in the first round of combat. And that kinda is where the Forbidden Lands is. The Forbidden Lands uses cards from 1 to 10, and you draw them to get your initiative score. And there are character abilities you can use to draw more than one card and then keep the better one. And the players can shuffle their cards around to do a bit of tactic. And the combat system is very low hit points, very deadly. So what usually ends up happening is that the players try to act before the enemy, be it through sneaking up on them, through an ambush situation, or if they have to get into a fair fight, they shuffle the highest initiative to their biggest damage dealer in the hope that he can take out or at least cripple the enemy before it is the enemy's turn. Now, if you go into a system where initiative is even more important, in a game like Shadowrun, for example, the number of actions you can take is determined by your initiative. Shadowrun, each combat round has a number of phases. So you roll initiative each round, and then the highest score acts, everyone acts, and then you subtract 10 from everyone's initiative score, and who still has a score above 0 gets to act again. And in Shadowrun, because it's like a cyberpunk setting with magic, drugs, and cyberware can give you a huge advantage on your initiative score. So a souped up street samurai can act like 3 times, while a regular Joe can just act once every round. Now in Shadowrun, this has a lot to do with character build and powers, because situational modifiers don't play a lot into the initiative rolls. But if you let situational modifiers and tactics play a lot into the initiative score, into the rolls, then the players will try to get these situational modifiers as high as possible to gain this combat advantage. Now, we once played a heavily house-ruled and modified version of the Dark Eye 4th edition, which is a very complex and complicated rule system to begin with. It's one of the first systems I ever played, so that's where I'm originally coming from as a gamer. Anyway, and in our system, you rolled for initiative, but I think it was 1d6 plus the modifier by your build, by your ability scores, by your weapon, by your armor, by your special abilities. So the d6 didn't play a huge role in your initiative, but rather your character build. and we only rolled that at the beginning of combat. And after that, if you wanted to modify your initiative, you had to take an action to do it. So you could like orient yourself, have a quick look around with an action, and re-roll your initiative. Or you could really orient yourself, take a breath, take a whole round, and then maximize your initiative to the highest score. And you could do a feint and attack the enemy's initiative, trying to lower it so that in the next combat round you would have the higher initiative. Now, the Dark Eye is a system with active reactions, an active parry system. So when your character is attacked and the enemy hits, you have to actively parry and deflect the blow. And you only get one reaction, maybe two if your character is skilled for that. And once these are used up, you cannot react to attacks anymore. So you get unparryable attacks that are very likely to hit. And we also didn't have a lot of hit points. And there was a wound system in place, so you really didn't want to get hit. Now, the standard rules were that you had one action, one reaction, but there were exceptions. There were special abilities where you could use your action as a reaction and your reaction as an action to attack twice in a round. We thought it would be interesting if that were the normal rule. So we tried that. And what happened was, when it was your turn to act and you had won the initiative, we would delay our action and let our enemy act first and attack us first. Because there was a good chance for an enemy to miss with their attack. And once they missed, we could take our turn and take our two actions, attack twice, but our enemy could only parry once because he had already used his action to attack. So then we had to add the house rule that the one who had the higher initiative could delay their action for longer and actually act last in the round, because acting last became an advantage. Now, funny thing about that, in my experience with fencing, which is admittedly live action, roleplay, LARP, combat, when you have a duel, when you stand in front of each other with a sword, you've got your guard up. You can't really be hit by an enemy attack. As long as your guard is up, it's very easy to move your sword a bit and parry the attack. So, to land a successful blow, your enemy would have to do something to either go around your guard or make you drop your guard. And you would drop your guard when you attack. You cannot guard and attack at the same time, at least not with a single weapon. So we would feint an attack, so our enemies would try to do a counter blow, do riposte, and then we would try to make something in the riposte, something through the parry, like dodge the attack, and then while the enemy is recovering, strike him while he's open. What I find funny is how this delaying of your action until you're the last one in the combat round who can add, and two swordsmen standing in front of each other, studying each other, waiting for that twitch, for that moment when the other will attack, so they can strike into their attack and hit them when they are not guarding. How similar that actually is. Was a really tactical but slow to use initiative system. The last system I want to go over is from Splittermond. Splittermond has a number of rules that sounded really fun on paper. And their initiative system is a so-called tick system. So you've got a huge clock, and every monster, every PC gets a token on this clock. And in combat, you just go around this clock, and whenever the ticks, the clock, hit a token, it is that NPC, that player's turn to act. And depending on what action they take, they use a different number of ticks on the clock and move down the tick system, move down the clock. So if you take a really quick action like drop a weapon, 1 tick, yell a word, 1 tick, do a stab someone with your dagger, 3 ticks, do an attack with your battle axe, 6 ticks, summon a demon with your spell, 10 ticks. You could build your character around this concept, have like special abilities that would lower the amount of required ticks for certain actions. You could take weapons that were faster or slower, and you could do a lot with tactics on this clock. Like, now it's my turn. If I do that and that, then I can act again before it's the enemy turn. Or then it's your turn next and then I go again. So the party can discuss their tactics and try to make the most of this initiative system. What it turned out to do was that all of the combat tactics went from the actual battlefield, so be that either from the battlefield in the theater of the mind or from a combat map onto the tick clock. It was so important that they would all just stare at the tick clock, and that would be all the tactics they would consider in the combat. And I personally didn't like that. I'm a huge fan of just using theater of the mind. I don't even use a combat map. I don't even use miniatures. And when I play a game that is more focused on tactical combat, I like combat maps and miniatures. And I don't want to use tokens on an initiative clock. So, as interesting as that system was, it pulled too much focus away from the tactics on the battle map, from the theater of the mind. I didn't like that. Anyway, what is your favorite initiative system? Or least favorite initiative system? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video and want to see more like it, consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.